Sometimes, in absolute frustration, you wonder whether there is any government going on in Canberra apart from issues of gender equality and coronavirus. Pauline Hanson authored an outstanding piece in Brisbane's Courier Mail yesterday, which affects us all. Her point was that we rely on, it's something we don't even think of, on multimodal freight transportation, that is rail, road and shipping. And this is her point, that once ensured that modal system, that everyday household and commercial items were moved across vast distances and there was limited effect on day-to-day road users. That's just common sense. But she then makes the point that government has failed to establish a properly regulated relationship between these three transport modes and may well be building Australia's longest and costliest rust line, she calls it, the Inland Rail. Now, this is the largest freight infrastructure project in Australia. As Pauline would say, please explain. Well, I have problems with the Inland Rail because it's proposed to go from Melbourne to Brisbane, but it stops 38 kilometres short of the Port of Brisbane. Farmers are unhappy. 1,700 kilometres, 10 billion at least. But when it stops 38 kilometres short of the Port of Brisbane at Acacia Ridge, all the freight will then be chucked onto trucks because the trains are too long. They are what's called double stacked. Do the people of Brisbane know that all this freight will travel through the streets of Brisbane? When I say they'll be double stacked, they'll end up being up to 1,800 metres long. That's 18 football fields. The Inland Rail route will impact 300 farmers in Western New South Wales. It'll be a new track when the existing track could have been upgraded for a fraction of the cost and farmers wouldn't have been impacted. There is a 100-year-old rail corridor, which means the project would be far less disruptive. But this is the way government operates. This has been the subject of massive lobbying. There was a 2015 review of the business case, but farms in northern Victoria, Western New South Wales and southern Queensland had 2 paragraphs in a 300-page report. The route crosses the Castlereagh River floodplain, so it could be washed away, the line, or it could act as a levee bank, preventing the flow of water across the land. Instead of supporting regional development, the Inland Rail is cutting towns off. Anthony Albanese once said there should be an inquiry. He's gone silent. Wonder why? The member for Parkes, Mark Coulton, has never discussed this with his electorate. The Mayor of Goondiwindi says they're using flood maps from 1976. The National Party in the last New South Wales state election lost 2 seats in electorates embracing the project. And of course, affected farmers sought a round table to discuss this with the Deputy Prime Minister McCormack. He wouldn't be able to answer any questions. He's hopeless, so he cancelled. Well, Pauline makes an even more important point, and that is, and I quote, foreign flagged coastal shipping vessels have led to the collapse of all but 2 rail freight companies, SCT Logistics and Pacific Rail. This is a massive issue. SCT Logistics is the only 100% Australian-owned interstate rail freight operator. They're spending $1 billion on rail infrastructure over the next 10 years. They've ordered new trains, but the government has allowed coastal shipping to take an ever-increasing volume of domestic freight by exploiting foreign workers who are paid $3 an hour. Pauline Hanson makes 2 points. It doesn't matter, I suppose, where the Inland Rail line goes if foreign-flagged coastal shipping sends rail freight companies broke. The second point, does government allow and indeed profit from foreign workers who are getting paid $3 an hour? Pauline Hanson joins me. Pauline, thank you for your time. Simply, I mean, the government, this is McCormack's area, is killing Australian enterprises and supporting foreign companies. That's your concern?
Yes, it is, and I've been talking about this for the last few years while I've been back in Parliament. It's a great concern because the foreign shipping in Australia takes all domestic product from port to port, and they actually, all they do, Alan, is pay $400 a year for to work in Australian waters, and that gives them five voyages a year.
So they pay $400
for a licence. They pay $400 to the government for a licence to actually do 5 voyages in Australia. Now, most of our ships in Australia are actually foreign ships. We only have about 11 or 13 that are registered in Australia. This would never happen in America. In America and Canada, you actually have to be registered in America to actually do any domestic coastal shipping, and America insists that the ships have to be built in America. Our government has forgone this, and it was under Warren Truss that actually brought this in, and there's foreign flag shipping, and it is destroying our domestic market here. It's destroying SCT Logistics because it's not, you know, they're putting, as you said, $1 billion into the industry over the next 10 years. They put $200 million along the Inland Rail line over the past 5 years. They give 1,000 jobs to Australians in rural and regional areas. And yet I asked the Prime Minister's office to have a meeting with Peter Smith. He flew from Hamilton Island, far North Queensland, all the way down. He sat outside the office of the Prime Minister. The advisor came out and told me, sorry, the Prime Minister won't see him. So when I went in to see the Prime Minister, I said, this was arranged. Why will you not meet Peter Smith? He said, I don't meet with lobbyists. I said, he is not a lobbyist. He said he's one of the biggest businessmen in Australia and actually employs 2,000 people, and he pays more taxes in this country than you get out of cabotage. He said, I don't meet with lobbyists. He can go and meet with the Deputy Prime Minister's office. And he never met with them. He actually met with the advisors who couldn't even answer his questions. So this is what they're dealing with. A Prime Minister that is so arrogant, he could not take the time and to understand what is happening in our country, and they're more worried about the multinationals. I'm curious about this.
And there's no obligation to pay these foreign crews Australian wages, and they're also exempt, I know, from
all the conditions.
Yeah, all national safe work practices which homegrown businesses have to meet. So what you're saying is, if we continue to reward...
they pay no access charge.
Yeah.
They pay no access charge. They pay no corporate tax. They pay no payroll tax. And they're bending over backwards to ensure that they're looked after. Well, what about our Australian companies? And this is what, if we get rid of Inland Rail, you know, and not only that, not the Inland Rail, with SCT Logistics and Pacific National, okay? You don't have the competition there as well. It won't make the Inland Rail viable. When they started Inland Rail, it was going to cost about $6 billion. Then it went to $10 billion. You know, we're at over $14 billion now. The ARTC have been bloody hopeless in dealing with the communities and understanding what their concerns are. The consultation process has been ridiculous. It's only because of the committee, the Senate inquiry, headed by Glenn Stirl, who's done a fantastic job, that we've been on this, and we've actually been able to get some common sense out of them to deal with for the locals and get their concerns answered.
The key point is, if we continue to reward these foreign flag vessels, that will then attract sufficient volume of freight onto those vessels to drive outfits like SCT Logistics and Pacific National out of business. So the Inland Rail becomes a white elephant. I mean, this is the point, isn't it? The more that they can track the stuff onto shipping, then they go to the ports, unload it, and all those are parked onto trucks. Trucks go down the roads, destroy the roads. We pay for all of that, and the rail line is empty. That's your point.
Yes, it is. And it's important that we have the rail lines, Alan, as well, because you know what happened? These people who have the coastal shipping, the foreign, they decide when they want to work. Guess what? With the pandemic, there was no foreign shipping here. So therefore, we had to rely on SCT and Pacific National to get the freight across Australia, which they were flat out trying to cope with.
Yes.
Now that they're back, you know, where's the government?
Well, that's right.
And we do need them, and we rely on them. They're Australians that need jobs.
Definitely. I mean, every freight train takes 108 B-double trucks off our roads. You'd think the government would be biased in favour of rail freight. I mean, without rail operators, roads just become parking lots.
And you were exactly right, Alan, about Acacia Ridge. And I said to them in the meeting last Thursday in Melbourne, I said, are you still so bloody minded about Acacia Ridge, or are you actually rethinking that? They said, we are actually going to have a look at that again, and we'll bring down a decision by next year. And you are so right. Do you know they're looking at 1.8 kilometre long trains by 2039, 42 trains, they're looking at extending it to 3.6 kilometre long trains, double stacked. How the hell can they take that in Acacia Ridge, which is at capacity now? So it's stupid where they're looking, and like I said, they are so bloody minded that they're not looking down the track, pun for words, but they're not looking at what the future you know, will hold for Brisbane.
I mean,
and you've got 50,000 residents that are up in arms.
Absolutely. I mean, foreign ships, what you're saying, are getting an unfairly gained market share. 2 interstate rail carriers will become 1 perhaps, then none. And the Inland Rail, billions of dollars, as Pauline makes the point, Inland Rail becomes a white elephant, a complete white elephant. Well, look, hang in there. It is, I mean, while you're dealing with this bloke McCormack, you may as well talk to the back fence because he hasn't got a clue. But it's inexcusable that the Prime Minister won't meet with these people. You and I will keep talking anyway, and you're always welcome on the program, Pauline. Thank you what you do for the people out there instead of talking about all this other nonsense. Good to talk to you. You're looking terrific too, like the blue. OK, there she is. There she is. Pauline Hanson.